an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Reaper, the 10th book. We're in double digits now, baby, of the Cradle series. Prologue and chapters 1, 2, and 3. In these chapters, guys, I miss Dross so much. I don't want to spend my whole episode talking about how much I miss Dross, but like, it's awful. I hate it. I miss him so much. Welcome to Spoil Me. Thank you for joining me, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am Natasha, and thank you very, very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Andy has commissioned the entire book, and we did have to wait until January to start it, which was agony, but here we are, and I am so excited to get started on this book. Out of the gate, I want to let you guys know, I was talking about this in the Discord for, Unspoiled has a Discord, which I will try and share those that link in the show notes for this once I release the episode. But I said something about how I think it probably would be good practice for me to re-listen to the previous book. And yet, the previous book was so sad, guys. It was such a bummer. And that's not at all a criticism of the writing. It was excellent and just very well done. And I pretty much re-listened to every section I covered for the show, like at least one time. So I have essentially read that book twice. But when it came down to doing a complete go-through before starting this book, I couldn't do it. I will be honest with you all. It just made me sad. So I went and I re-listened to the last chapter and the epilogue, just to get myself like generally on the right foot, which did turn out to be a good idea because there were so many little things that I had kind of forgotten get started at the end of the book. Andy's here. Hi, Andy. So I just wanted to let you guys know that because there may be people who are listening. This can happen when somebody is mainlining podcast episodes. They forget how much time passes between recordings, and they will be like, how does she not remember this character and what they did last book? I will tell you how I don't remember. It's been 6 months and I have covered 8 other properties. That's how. Actually, 8 is probably conservative. So I just wanted to put that out there. And if you guys are like, this is something you should definitely know and remember, go ahead and let me know that. As long as it's not a spoiler, reminding me of something that you think if I were being my best self, I would have remembered. I think that's fair game. There's a difference between reminding me of something and leading me to put 2 and 2 together when I might not be doing that myself. I am going to have to trust you guys to not spoil me. That's what I'm going to have to do. Florian says, Will Wight shouted you out, didn't he? Yeah, he posted it. He reposted my Instagram that I tagged him in and put it on his. So, and was just like, check out this podcast. So thank you, Will Wight, for that. I did get a notification from Crowdcast that I had more people registered for this like live recording than I'm allowed to have at my current membership level. But that only is a problem if everybody who registered shows up, and that's not a problem. We're at 22 people though, which is not bad. So everybody, I already started off with saying how sad I am that Dross is. I mean, look, I have faith Dross will be back. It's not like I really think he's not going to bring Dross back at all. But I don't know if it will be the same Dross that we used to know and love. I'm not even sure if I want it to be the exact same Dross that we used to know and love. You know what I mean? I'm going to turn a light on here. Because that's the sort of thing that I feel like a lot of times readers don't really know what they want. Same with TV viewers. We're going to think we want something. And then if people are good writers, they can do not what you thought you wanted, and it's still great. I was like unfairly sort of hoping that the next book we would open with a promising lead. And I guess we got one with Lyndon, like finding out that there's soul-smithing information that's incredibly valuable in the labyrinth. I guess that's a lead, but it's incredibly nebulous at this point. That is not anything specific to that we know addresses what it is he's concerned about. It's just a general trove of information and knowledge. And at the same time, if he had opened this book and we felt like we already had a solution, that would seem too easy, wouldn't it? Like, you want Dross's sacrifice to mean something. So, all right, fair play, I suppose. So, let's start off with the prologue, which I think might be the shortest prologue of any of the books so far. We are with Osmanthus Aurelius. This is Osriel. Now, guys, we have talked about Osriel being like having a family and starting the Aurelius clan in Cradle. Can I tell you how fucking incredibly dense I have been this entire time? It did not occur to me that he started this dynasty before like ascending to be an Abaddon. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought that he like was an Abaddon and then he came to Cradle. Why would I think that? That's like objectively not how we've been shown that it works ever. That's just not a thing we've ever seen. So I don't know why that was in my head, but getting all of this backstory about how he was just a regular dude who was incredibly gifted, it was startling to me. I should have realized that this was how it would have had to work to a degree, but I wasn't at all prepared. And this starts off with, he looked up into the ash falling from the sky and knew he'd failed. His descendants had died in droves, trusting in him. So I am assuming that this has to do with the Dread Gods, with perhaps the Dread War, which we get a hint of from Malice's perspective. Malice did not live through the Dread War, but she is thinking to herself that she has seen the memories of people who have, and it's enough to make her incredibly fucking twitchy about the possibility of causing anything, because we saw her fighting a Dread God in, what was it, like the third book? Before we really understood any of this and, you know, didn't know that Mercy was related to her. And Lyndon is sort of like, why doesn't she can't just beat the Dread God. And Mercy's like, that's not how it works. No, you can stop it and make it turn around. And I was under the impression that the reason for that is simply you can't beat it. But once we're in Malice's POV, it turns out you can, and that can make it so much worse. And they don't die in the way that, you know, an ordinary mortal being will die, unless you get whatever little secret recipe Elder Whisper is working on over here. But they will team up with each other if one of them is hurt badly enough, and if one is, quote, killed. And I'm assuming that killed doesn't mean actually killed, you know. The consequences are just like very vaguely described as like basically catastrophic, but it's not specified exactly what that would look like. So I'm assuming that's what's going on in this memory, is that something went wrong with the Dread Gods because he's blaming himself for whatever is going on here. And this is when he leaves the orb with the like void inside of it with the message behind for one of his family members. And we find out later that he was only expecting to like wait a generation or two. I have, like, because it says at the beginning of the prologue, personal record 8154, that's like the only piece of information. I haven't compared that to any other, I think that there's another memory that we get from him later, or maybe we don't actually. It's not an official memory, is it? It's just a description of his life. Because I was going to say, I'm not clear on exactly how long it has actually been before we have, Ethan beginning to actually aspire to be an Abaddon, which is clearly what he's doing. He's like working on this mission. But it feels like Azrael has been waiting a lot longer than he expected. If he had still not ascended by the time he leaves this marble here. Or maybe he has ascended and he has like come back because of whatever's going wrong here. I shouldn't make assumptions, I guess. But what I'm saying is that the sense of time is not super clear to me. I'm assuming that's on purpose. It's fine. Let's be honest, guys. I don't think any of our senses of time are doing super well in real life either. So I'm not really that worried about it. So then we go into chapter 1. So Linden has Elder Whisper like trussed up in wind aura, riding on a 1,000-mile cloud as he brings him to talk to Yaren. This is so great. Elder Whisper is just like, dude, this is really like kind of embarrassing, actually. And I would have made my own cloud to ride on, which would have also been fine. And Linden does not say this out loud, but he is clearly like, yeah, I would certainly have trusted you to come with me with no arguments. And it's not exactly a given that Elder Whisper would have run away, but there is a sort of sensation to the way that he has been interacting with Linden that suggests to me inconsistency in terms of like his commitment to telling the whole story here. I feel like he's sort of slippery and has to be cornered into sharing everything, or else he won't. And I don't know if that's like just self-preservation, which can look like cowardice. They sometimes can appear to be the same thing. Or if it is just, sometimes we just have these things about our own natures that we can't help. Maybe that's part of his personality is he's like, ooh, I kind of can be a little bit shady and tricky sometimes. But yeah, I don't blame Linden for taking this precaution at all. And when he gets back to the cloud base, Little Blue shows up and is basically like, yeah, what the fuck? And he has to apologize to her for leaving her behind. She's like, she wasn't worried about him because she could sense whether or not he was okay or in danger or anything. But she's just kind of like, that wasn't cool, man. What the hell? So we go inside. There were scripts all over the territory to protect them from being spied on by the spiritual senses of others, but Linden carried a ward key. Mercy and Ziel were still recovering, and the biggest surprise was that he didn't feel Ethan at all. So I just want to register real quick here that in these first 3 chapters, and for those following along, I'm going to attempt as close to 40 pages with an even number, as close to 40 pages per episode as I can, according to the way that chapters break down. In other words, and unfortunately the desktop version doesn't show this, but the Kindle version, chapter 3 was page 41. So it was almost exactly 40 pages. It worked out beautifully for this episode. Sometimes a chapter might start at, 38 pages or 42 pages, but that's as what I'm going to try to do. Most things I cover for Spoil Me, I do 50 pages. These books are so dense and there is so much to talk about that I always wind up going over time when I do 50 pages. So I've just decided to be just admit to myself and everyone else, I'm not going to be able to do that. And, I hope that you guys can get behind that because I think you guys are probably understanding why I take so long to talk about some things. But anyway, in these first 3 chapters, we do not see Ziel or Mercy or Orthos at all, which also is just very unsettling. Like, not unsettling in the way that I'm concerned that something's going on with them. It's just, there is such a sort of like team vibe at this point in the story because of what they just went up against. And knowing that they are still down for the count in this fashion, where they're not even being looped in on something this massive, that really sort of hammers home how much recovery everybody still needs to do. And this winds up being like something that Lyndon says later, essentially like, well, probably they had time to like, you know, get some things figured out and nothing else was going to go hugely wrong anytime soon. Their luck couldn't be that bad. And I was like, all right, William, Mr. Wight, stop it. That's just mean-spirited. That's just rude. That's akin to Dross in the last book saying, at least there's not 2 dread gods. So I just really, I'm looking forward to seeing Mercy and Ziel and Orthos especially, guys, because he was so injured, and losing Dross is hard enough, but Orthos, having experienced the physical harm that he did, just hurts my heart. And the end of the last book, we just see him, he's not able to like change his size back down to normal, so he's still huge and like kind of stuck in that place until he heals up more. And considering how quickly this book starts after the end of the last one, I'm assuming that's going to be the case for another few days at least before he's able to like talk and, you know, shrink back down again. But I'm just estimating here. I almost said guesstimating, but I actually hate that. So I'm estimating here. So Yaren greets him and is just like, I really was thinking that you'd be gone a lot longer. And he can tell from the way she's trying to be cool about it that she was very anxious. And, you know, at the end of the last book, Ethan has to sort of convince her to leave Lyndon alone. Her instinct is to go and comfort him. And this is just such a thing. If you are a person who has a partner who has experienced a huge loss or is going through something emotional and draining, sometimes just depression, sometimes the only thing that you can do is let them work through things on their own. And that is like the hardest thing. To not try and cheer them up, to not try and fix things for them, to not try and make them not think about the thing that is giving them pain. And while it's understandable, those impulses come from a place of love, it's not actually helpful a whole lot of the time and can feel kind of invalidating, you know, like if you've lost somebody important to you and somebody is trying to make you behave as if you didn't lose a person, it can be kind of like disrespectful feeling, you know? And Yaren, thankfully, when Ethan says this, is she recognizes the truth of what he's saying, and she does keep her distance, but you know, it wears on her. She's an action-oriented person. Sitting on her hands is not something that comes naturally to her. So I love this bit where Elder Whisper tries to like fool her with his little foxfire shit again. And she basically is like, that's weird. Doesn't actually seem that amazing from here. And he's just like, God damn it. He can't fool them. They're too advanced. It's kind of great. Considering how unbelievably powerful Elder Whisper once seemed in the first book when we met him. So mysterious. So powerful. And I mean, he is mysterious still. That's not gone. But it's just great in these books to feel the way that Lyndon probably feels. You know, we experienced this when he returned to Sacred Valley and went into like the Heaven's Glory treasure troves and was essentially like, wow, this is all garbage. You know, I really do enjoy that growth. So they settle down, and Elder Whisper begins talking about the labyrinth. And there are truths that he knows about how to kill the dread gods, which what he says later is essentially, I know how to make them mortal. Like, and it's not, I say I know how to, and it's not actually, he doesn't say that specifically. He says like that there are keys, like, you cannot simply disassemble them physically. You must destroy them on a fundamental level. Sever the origin of their existence. And Yeren has been so, like, mistrustful of the promise Elder Whisper is making that he has this knowledge. But when he says this, as somebody who has wielded penance, which did just essentially stop a person from being alive in this weird way, she's like, oh, actually, this rings true. I do not understand the mechanics well myself, Whisper said. These are ideas I have stitched together from fractured memories and broken whispers. Broken whispers, by the way. Great name for like a song or a bar. I don't know. But as I see it, any who could kill the dread gods directly have already moved on from this world. Even the monarchs combined could not do it. However, there is something anchoring the dread gods to life. If you remove it, they will be made mortal. No weaker, you understand, but mortal. Honestly, this is a good gimmick. Make them mortal, but just as fucking dangerous. Pretty smart. This is one of those things that I imagine as a writer, it starts to be more and more difficult when your characters begin to power up to continue giving them real threats that they have to go up against without making those threats feel so ludicrous and out of proportion to whatever you've written before that it starts to almost become monotonous. And like people who are Supernatural fans out there, I only ever got to season 2, didn't love it, I quit, but I have heard this becomes kind of the problem in Supernatural. And what I'm loving in this opening of this book is that we're getting this suggestion. So we may be like revisiting the foe from the last book, but because they will be in a different condition, it doesn't feel like we're just doing the same thing over again. And then we have the whole thing with Rhaegon Shen, which we will get to, going into the labyrinth and like essentially losing his power because of the suppression field. And that's another great way to do the same thing. If you can't come up with a threat that actually goes up against your hero at their current power level, you take some of their power away somehow. That's the only way to like create a genuine feeling of tension. So here we are. I can't wait to talk about the Rhaegon Shen thing. I really do have to pace myself here, guys, because it's like almost half an hour in and I am not even through chapter 1. Okay. So Lyndon asks if they can get into the labyrinth. And he's like, yeah, there is a way inside. Sage of the Endless Sword did it, and so can you. And then we have Lyndon sort of thinking about what's going on. He is really startled at the fact that his whole point, like the mission that he thought he was on, was to save Sacred Valley. And while it's debatable whether that actually is what he did his best, and it's behind him. And now he's sort of faced with whether or not to keep pushing through greater and greater threats or take a breather, collect himself, settle down a little bit, and maybe like he says, to get time to learn what it meant to be a sage, time to get to know his family again, though he wasn't quite sure how he felt about that, which is very fair. We didn't see them in these 3 chapters either, I should mention. And I am absolutely dying for any acknowledgement from them of what Lyndon has achieved, because we still have not gotten it, other than from his sister, which, you know, and I'm just so hungry for it. It's wild. I have been infected with the same need for approval that Lyndon has, and I resent it. So, this is when he thinks about how he's going to do his best to try and figure out how to restore Dross. And when he asks about soulsmithing records, and the fox is like, well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Lyndon says, okay, I intend to learn whatever I can, but we still need to discuss our next actions. Elder Whisper raised his eyebrows in an expression that wouldn't have looked out of place on a human face. I expected more commitment from you. There are too many questions left. For one thing, if you know about this, why haven't the monarchs taken action? In response to which Elder Whisper just says, I have had dreams. And Lyndon's like, what? What? Is that even answering my question? And essentially Elder Whisper is like, every time I've dreamt of like going to see a monarch and talk about this, I always see that I die. Sometimes our home dies, and I can't tell which monarch it is. And I shouldn't have to go ask them anyway, because they know this shit, and yet they have not taken action on any of it. Which, why is that? That's something that you will probably have to go and discuss with them. And this is when they get interrupted by Suriel's message, which we saw her send to Lyndon at the end of the last book. I'm sorry, hold on. And I was sort of wondering how that was going to manifest. And it turns out it's just this overwhelming sensation that sort of, in his mind, the emotions manifest into a sense that he can put to words, which is, I'm sorry, hold on, which is what we know she said. But I wasn't sure if it was just going to be the words popping up in his head as if he could hear her voice in his head. And this I find more interesting because it's like so much less tangible, and it's something that he can't know for sure that this was an external message. He kind of hand waves it in the moment and puts it down to being stressed out and a little bit like on edge. So this is when we go, Ethan shows up here, by the way. Oh no, I missed something. Quickly, repeat your entire conversation before you forget a word. So then we go to Rhaegon Shen. Okay. Look, I'm not trying to say that the Labyrinth challenge is absolutely built exactly for Lyndon's particular skill set. I'm just saying that the Labyrinth is absolutely 100% built for Lyndon's particular skill set. Am I wrong? So Rhaegon Shen is up in this bitch, and like, one, using a void key is real difficult because there is so little energy down there that Rhaegon Shen's like depowered almost completely. A void key is way too difficult to open, and he can't like use up the energy to open it. He can't exert himself in attack and defense the way he normally would because his energy does not refill quickly anymore. And he has all of these constructs that he has built to help him wrapped up in scripted containers, essentially, all over his person, so that he can pull them out and use them and then like pretty much immediately put them away. In this, there's a, like, if I were going to put a physical sort of equivalent on this, it's like if the air is full of acid and you have to take a weapon out and use it and get it put back into a like safe case somewhere before the acid begins to eat away at it. So, I mean, Lyndon's whole thing is planning ahead. That's like his entire jam. He and I have this in common. And Lyndon, this would be an interesting return to something that he hasn't had to do in a little while, which is compensate. He has managed to advance so much that the actual power he's wielding is very impressive, and he's doing incredible things with it. And is a sage of a type that nobody's seen before. And it's just this wild sort of, but we know that the Lyndon that we met in Sacred Valley constantly had little traps and ingenious maneuvers that he went the night before and put in place, or just genuine trickery, And that was how he made up for the fact that he didn't have the advancement that everyone around him had. And while the people of Sacred Valley might look down on that, a bitch does what a bitch got to do. And I cannot think of anybody better than Lyndon to get through this labyrinth with the kind of mind that he has. It may take some time for him to get back into that headspace, because I could see, this is the sort of thing that I think happens to everybody. If you experienced a particular type of adversity when you were very little that caused you to be a sort of target, you try to live the rest of your life so that you never experience that again. So I would really understand if Lyndon has come so much to depend on his power. I mean, we experienced the suppression field in Sacred Valley, but even so, he was still so much more powerful than other people there. It wasn't like it completely disappeared. I could see it being almost triggering to have to go back to the kind of mindset you were in when you were in a dark period of your life and being treated like garbage by everybody around you. So it would probably be difficult for him to get himself back in the headspace where he has to think he has to think laterally. It's different, but I just have a lot of faith that he will be able to do this. And I'm certain it's gonna be I don't know if he gets through the entire labyrinth in this book or how this goes. In the past, I have been so wrong about the way things are going to be structured. I didn't expect the Uncrowned tournament to span 2 books, for example. But I am really excited to see a revisiting of that side of his personality, because I feel that we've lost a little bit of that along the way, and that's understandable. It's not a knock or anything, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have to go back to your roots sometimes, exercise that brain a little bit. So Reigen Shen is out here looking through all of this stuff. He is gathering up as much as he can using this construct that looks like a little robotic dog that goes and picks things up in its mouth and brings it to him. And normally he'd be able to just sift through stuff and pull it to him with his abilities, but he just doesn't have that power down here. So he has to rely on actually physically looking through things. And let's see. In some ways, the Monarch Reigen Shen was now weaker than if he had never trained in the sacred arts a day in his life, but he had his own methods. So this is when this ghost ghoul kind of thing oozes up out of the floor. It is an attack from Subject 1. And he uses a construct that would normally be Herald level destruction. And it has been dampened so much at this point that all it does is just disintegrate the spirit. And that is just extremely scary to me. A Herald level weapon. And that's all it does here. Yikes, That's like a missile that all it does is knock a can off a fence kind of thing, So his little POV ends with, he would empty this place if it took him a decade, because in the end, he would do what no one else had ever done and seize control of the greatest weapons ever created, the Dread Gods, all 5 of them. And his intention is to simply keep going through the labyrinth. What everyone else has done is go partially in, and then they come back out again because it's difficult to stay inside. You lose so much power. And he just knows he's going to get spotted if he handles it that way. So he has to pack as much as he can and plan to succeed before he has to leave is really the way he's approaching this. And I hate Rhaegon Shen so much, guys. I really do. I am not looking forward to this. Okay, so we have the Malice POV where she beats up the bleeding phoenix and gets it to turn around and walk away. And then she has a chat with North Strider, who is really pissy with her about letting the children face the Titan. You were supposed to replace Yeren Aurelius in driving off the Dread God, not join her. To which she's basically like, hey, I don't need your advice on how to handle my family or like making sure that the kids are okay. They're fine. And for his part, North Strider feels like shit. She can, like, the spiritual sense she's getting off of him is this profound exhaustion. He's like broken a little bit, not in a permanent way, but just truly in a place that we have never seen him before. And also like genuinely angry. And it seems like nobody really gets emotion off of North Strider very often. So it's marked that he is angry. And let's see, it ends with him saying, maybe you need a lesson in spatial transfer. She reached out on her own and with shock felt Yeren almost immediately. Mercy, Athan, and Lyndon were all there too, their presences a bit fainter than Yeren's. And she realizes that Rhaegon Shen's anchor is how they, like, that's what they use to get here. And then the next paragraph says, Malice spared another moment of anger for the lion. Even his belongings were opposing her now. Guys, remind me, why does she consider this opposing her? Why didn't she want them here more quickly? I'm not clear on what she feels is like the downside of them arriving. I feel like I missed something. So yeah, this is when North Strider says he's going into seclusion because fate has been moving erratically. And Malice is kind of like, yeah, same. This, like, she's thinking it to herself, but shit has definitely been really weird lately. And when she asks how long he's going to be gone, he says he's not really sure. Unless you can share more details than you already have. And she just gives him a look like, yeah, fat chance. And when he leaves, it says Malice slipped into the world of night and summoned the shadows of the future. So she's trying to see what's going on with fate as well. And I'm wondering how much each of them are going to be able to piece together about the Vroshir. Like, how do they know what the Vroshir are? It's unclear for me just how much of the battle that goes on in heaven, essentially, monarchs that remain on the planet are aware of. Let's see. George says she didn't want them to stop the Titan because it was way too dangerous. She sent them away to protect them from the Titan. She tried to send them away to Moongrave, and then his anchor let them get back. Oh, I forgot that she, like, right, okay. She wanted them to start serving her needs instead of getting distracted with more Sacred Valley related stuff. Bless her heart. That's definitely not going to happen, Malice. All right, so then we get this information about Osmanthus as a boy. And I've talked about a lot of this already, and since I am once again running low on time, I will try and make this quick, but essentially he was a complete prodigy. The kind of prodigy that it's not even like anyone can touch him sort of thing. Truly doing shit nobody has ever seen before, ever. It's not even like he's reaching a point of that his elders have reached already, but at a very young age. It starts that way, but then when he's doing stuff like manifesting icons, the way it's written sounds to me like nobody has ever done that. And the way this goes is really interesting to me. He starts off as just a very precocious child and gradually begins to get far enough ahead of his peers that they begin to not want to hang out with him. They start to avoid him. At first, he seems like a rising star that they can sort of like hook their wagons to, I think. And so they're all trying to befriend him. But when it becomes clear that he's just in like his own whole stratosphere, it's too much and it's intimidating, and it just feels like I can't hitch my wagon to you at all. You're far out of my reach. So he has to sort of reconcile himself to being a loner because there's nobody who can keep up with him anywhere. And it's interesting because he gets to this place eventually. He focuses on combat stuff and making weapons. Let's see. While Osmanthus was not entirely content with his solitude, he knew it was only temporary. He would eventually find someone. Until then, he would slow down. He gave up his spear for a broom, but he didn't mind that. He liked being the only sacred artist in the world to fight with a broom. It had style. So he continues growing and eventually manifests an icon of his choice in front of a panel of renowned scholars. The broom icon. Rather than impressed, the scholars were crushed. Osmanthus had made their entire lives into a joke, publicly humiliating them. No less than 3 of them killed themselves within a week. All right. Calm the fuck down, okay? What I like about this is how not seriously Osmanthus takes himself, really. I was going to say his power, but that feels unfair. He takes the power seriously. He does not take himself super seriously, even though he knows how much farther ahead of everyone else he is. And this is something I think that you really do begin to see when somebody is incredibly advanced and doing things that are outside of the sphere of most other experts in that particular field. They can become sort of irreverent, because they're bored. Honestly, that seems to be like the kind of vibe that I get off of it when it happens a lot of the time. It's just this general like, well, why not? Why are we taking this so seriously? And people who have not reached their level take offense because for them, this is all still a mystery, a really big deal, and something that they have, like, I think, an idea attached to the concept of reaching the level that person is at, and they don't understand the mindset one would be in if they had been at that level their whole life, so far ahead of everybody else. So those folks take it much more to heart because they have to put so much more energy into getting halfway there than this person had to put in to get all the way where they already are. And while that's understandable on the one hand for people to like feel like it's almost disrespectful to them, also it's so not about you. Get over it. Like years ago, I had a blog and I was training to do a triathlon. And I did a sprint triathlon to start with. And the sprint triathlon, I was trying to make it more fun for myself. And I made a pink cape to wear during the run portion that like I made out of like a disposable tablecloth and ribbon, something like this, because I just wanted to have a good time. I also had a giant Mylar butterfly balloon to mark where my bicycle was in the scrum area, basically where you would transition. And I cannot tell you guys how many fucking comments my blog post got from very serious triathletes who were like personally offended at the fact that I made a cute little cape to do my jog in. It had nothing to do with them. It was just such a ridiculous thing for them to get bent out of shape about. And somebody left a comment I will never forget where they said something like, you are spitting on the tradition and the dignity of sacrifice of those who participate in this sport. I'm what now? I'm wearing a plastic tablecloth cape. That's what I'm doing. I don't know what you're talking about, but you sound like you need some medication and a vacation. That's what it sounds like to me. I'm just saying. So these people, same. They need to take some time off and really consider, because this man manifests an icon that you don't like and you decide to kill yourself. There's something else going on there. That's just not on him. I'm sorry. Anyway, so this is when he decides that he is going to become somebody who builds things and researches. And he starts to do this thing where he creates a weapon, or he begins to create weapons, and he figures out a way to allow himself to kill himself and then revive himself. He makes a device for this, but does not realize that when he does it, that's going to be a catalyst to manifest the death icon, which is not what the fuck he wanted. It actually bothers him that that's the direction that we have gone to. And because that's the direction he has gone, making deadly weapons is even easier for him than it was before, which again, that's not what he wants to leave as his legacy. So he abandoned his weapons. He focused on another of his talents, his sight. When he advanced to Monarch, he developed the bloodline ability to see. Osmanthus was so relieved that he wept. This was the ability that he wanted to define his legacy, and he would leave his descendants with the ability to see as he did, to one day catch up to him. So I really love the fact that he was doing something that was so destructive, but he was aware, and seeing becomes almost like an escape valve. This becomes the thing that he leaves behind instead of being, we know that he has the scythe, and that becomes the function that he performs. So he doesn't escape it completely, not really, unfortunately, but he's able to leave later generations something that's got a little bit more hopefulness to it. So then we have Lyndon bringing Yaren to her master's, basically his shed in the woods, his tool shed, kind of, that's the equivalent of it. And he's really excited to surprise her, but the closer they get to it, the more twitchy she's being. And he finally realizes that she's genuinely getting emotionally freaked out. And she asks at one point, it's not his body, is it? And he is startled to even think of that. Thinks about how she didn't seem bothered by his body when they first met. And then he was like, oh, but I didn't really know her then, did I? Maybe it was very obvious if I saw her now with my current eyes that she was distressed. But at the time, she just seemed so fucking focused. So they go in, and she does have a really intense reaction. It's a place that he never let her into. So there's all this stuff in here, including some stuff of her own, clothing that was shredded from her training. And this is the sort of thing that anybody who has returned to a place they haven't been in a long time, or who has found a trunk full of stuff that they haven't opened in a decade, it's really weird to see things again. And the emotions that come, it's very disorienting. And eventually she just breaks down and cries, talking about how she broke his sword. And I like that he just is all he does is hold her while she cries. And I'm like, that is the right thing to do. You don't need to say anything. Just let her feel what she's feeling. And he has brought a bunch of void keys. So they start piling everything into these keys. They do not bring the shriveled hand, which I understand why Lyndon doesn't want it near him, because it's going to draw a dread god. But I also feel like leaving it here is not great either. I don't really know what the best option would be. And he finds a jewel that's got a bunch of records on it of what it was like for the previous people who went through the labyrinths. And we have a conversation between the Sword Sage and Tiberian Aurelius, in which basically all of the other records on this jewel point to, you either have to go into the labyrinth by yourself, or you need to have people that you like really, truly, implicitly trust, because people who are not 100% behind one another turn on each other once they're in here, because they get greedy, and from what we have seen about how incredibly backstabby sacred artists often are, this makes total sense to me. I think that it's understandable how Lyndon isn't like positioned so well, because he does have people that I think that he can trust to this point. It would be interesting though to see if they were tempted to stab him in the back, and what would achieve that. What point would they have to reach to feel like they are going to, profit by betraying him? So at this point, he begins to try and get into the labyrinth. And he says, "Open." His words crashed against the door and fell apart. And when he brings Elder Whisper, they do not know why it won't open. Elder Whisper essentially is like, it's probably the Titan. Like, they don't know. And Whisper's so unsure of himself that Lyndon is very nervous about it. Because Malice knows what Rhaegon Shen is, like, has been messing with, but I don't think Malice is aware of what he is currently doing. When will she notice? That's what I want to know, because I think if they were to talk to Malice about, hey, we found an entrance into this labyrinth that should work, but it's weirdly blocked off, I think she'd be like, oh, fuck. And she would realize, put two and two together. But I don't think there's any reason for them to tell her about this at the moment. So I don't know how long it will be before they begin to realize that's what's going on. So this is when, let's see, Lyndon's like, well, this gives us time to prepare. And Elder Whisper is like, yeah, there's no disaster looming over us right now. And I was like, stop it. Don't say that. So this is when we go to Surreal. And she puts out a public broadcast looking for Osriel, which is essentially, it's the equivalent of being like, hey guys, our number one weapon is missing. We literally have no idea where he is. We really, really need him and are extremely weak and vulnerable right now. And like, obviously they have been avoiding doing this, but at this point shit is hitting the fan and they have no choice. She's got to do what she's got to do. And I love this moment. They have your scythe. If you could see what they're doing with it, it would break your heart. Come back and tell us what you saw. Because if you saw this and you left anyway, then I'll execute you myself. And I was like, oh, shit. I really do enjoy this a lot. All divisions were currently stretched to their absolute limits, but there was a special pressure on the Phoenixes right now. And she has her presence with her, and she says something about how, like, or she thinks about how they had abandoned like 990 sectors. And her presence essentially is like, no, they're very likely to recover if we like get things taken care of. You don't need to continue to add to the pile of guilt and disaster. It's plenty bad. You don't need to elaborate on it all. Embellish reality, which I did appreciate. And the fucking Mad King, man, he is so scary with this scythe. Oh my God, I really hate it. The last image was only shown for a moment before an overwhelming tide of blue light as the Abaddon delivering the report escaped. But even in that brief flash, less than a second, Suriel could see the sky behind the Vroshir, and the entire iteration crack. There were 1,000 of these, and they covered the room. And I'm sorry, guys, if you can hear these dogs. I just... So... her presence is, there's this great bit where her presence is like, oh, it's really difficult because everybody who ascends, they're very individualist and they're difficult to convince to do things as a group and in teams. And then Suriel asks for advice from her presence and essentially goes, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And her presence is like, yeah, it's really weird how people who ascend are super individualist and cannot be convinced to do that. And I was just like, that is actually a pretty good bit. That feels like the truth about how dealing with people who have a lot of power would be. You each begin to just get high on yourself, I would imagine. Like, there's just no way to avoid that, right? When you not only have a great deal of power, but it's going to be a specialized power that the other powerful people don't have. Like, they all have overlapping abilities, but they have their, you know, sort of their speciality, you know? So she asks, what are my odds of getting 2 other judges to work with me against the Vroshir? What if I define victory as forcing the Vroshir incursion to end early? Connect me to the Titan. With a faint sigh, her presence obeyed. So this, oh my God, you guys, look at this. It's 5:00 and I'm going to go over time, but I still won't have enough time. I'm really hopeless. I had to like kind of revisit the end of the last book. So I feel like, you know, I should have known this was coming. The town in which the residents of Sacred Valley found shelter was called, quite simply, Refuge. It had started off as a temporary camp, but that had been years ago. And I... Asher is in the chat trying to like let me know 12 minutes left or 10. Thank you, Asher, for your efforts. I'm sorry that I am so bad at this. This is so delightful to me. Jai Long could toy. Oh wait, no. You know what, guys? I'm realizing like this is. Yeah. Okay. The end of chapter 2, I said that I covered chapters 1, 2, and 3. I don't think so. I think I covered chapters 1 and 2. Let me just double check here because like I said, the pages are not listed on the Kindle on desktop for some reason. It's only in my app. Yeah, okay. Chapter 3 starts at page 41. So I stopped there. Okay, good. So I lied to you all. I'll have the right name once I load this prologue in chapters 1 and 2. Apologies that I was incorrect in my introduction. But good. I'm actually not hugely behind after all. Yay! Look at me. I actually did it. I only did it because I was rushing because I thought I had a whole other chapter to cover. My bad. Okay, good. Well, guys, I am just so excited about this because it feels like we're really starting to delve into a whole different world here. We have had the Abaddon, you know, they've been part of things for sure. We have seen what's going on with them, but it has felt so removed from what's going on with Linden so much of the time that there have been times where despite enjoying the Abaddon storyline, I will be like, yeah, but go back to Linden though. You know, go back to Yaren. I want to know what's going on with Mercy. I will get frustrated going to what's happening with the Abaddon. And now I feel like things are beginning to dovetail enough that I am really invested in things with the Abaddon. And I should mention too, rereading the series, I pay so much more attention to what's going on with them than I did the first time because it feels more relevant now that I understand. That is not a criticism of the writing exactly, but I will say that the people that I have talked to, and there are not many of them, but they exist, who had difficulty getting into this series, the Abaddon were the obstacle for them. They felt like they were just kind of able to like grasp what was going on with the magical system and what was happening with Linden, and they understood all of this. But the departures to the Abaddon felt so esoteric and completely outside. And there's a lot of language used and titles used and terminology used that you don't know what all of it means yet. And that can be a difficult thing to get past, you know. I could see, if I had read this on my own, almost grazing through those chapters and not really absorbing it completely, you know. But because I was reading it, like commissioned to read it, I did my best to actually delve into them. But I'm sure if I went back and listened to my coverage, I was not giving that very much time when I talked about it. And I probably wasn't understanding what I was saying half the time. So, I will say that I'm looking forward to what's going on with the Abaddon feeling more relevant and immediate. And overall, I'm just interested in finding out what that transition period is like, because it's really cool to see the Abaddon who are wildly powerful and can literally raise people back from the dead and like put planets to rights. But what is it like for the people who just ascended? I want to know all about this, you know? So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I will be, you know, doing a lot more talking about Suriel's chapters or her POVs in depth from here on out. Guys, do you hear these dogs? Truly, I don't know what's happening out there. It's like somebody has a dog fighting ring right outside my window. Anyway, okay, good. I'm so glad that I didn't like completely screw up my timing on this. Hurrah. Thank you again so much to Andy for commissioning this entire book. I am just so excited to be starting this. It's the kind of thing where every time so far that I have like caught up and a new book has come out, it has felt like, well, surely that's got to be the last book for a little while. And then Wight drops another book like 2 months later. The man is a machine. Like genuinely, what? And I am wondering already, like by the time I finish the coverage of this, is he going to already have announced book 11? You know? And, oh, nobody can hear the dogs. Oh, good. I just sound like a lunatic then. Also, I will be letting you guys know if the rest of Elder Empire, also written by Will Wight, gets commissioned, of course. So keep an eye out. If I will make the announcements of that on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. But yeah, I actually went back and like re-listened to part of that recently as well, because I was just enjoying that so much. All right. I'm going to wrap. Thank you guys again very, very much for coming and hanging out with me. I hope that you are enjoying the coverage and my profanity-laced commentary. Appreciate you all, and I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.